We've been talking about the gifts of the Spirit and also signs. There's lots of things happening in the world right now. You know, and it makes you wonder where we are, what's going to happen next. Everybody's worried about what's going to happen, but it's been that way. Been that way for a long time, but we are in the end time. We're getting closer and closer. There's a lot of things that we've already brought out. Last week we talked about the blood moons. And this week let's look at what Jesus said about it. In Luke chapter 21. Let's start in verse 20. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out. And let not them that are in the countries enter thereunto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now there's two or three things right here that can tell us what time he's talking about. Because Jerusalem was surrounded and the temple torn down in AD 7. Before, when he's talking at the beginning of this discourse, he's talking about in verse 12, they shall deliver you up in the synagogues, put you in prison, brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. That all happened to the apostles, to the early Christians. You shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren, kinfolk, friends. This has happened through all the ages, but this is a specific time Jesus is talking about. You shall be hated, all men, my name's sake. But there shall not a hair of your head perish. In your patience possess ye your soul. He's talking to the men there with him that day. What was going to happen to them. But this is good for us also in our day. Because it started back then and it's still going on. Persecution of Christians. For my name's sake, Jesus is talking about Christians. He's also, in the verses we read starting in verse 20, he's talking about Jerusalem as a city. It's not only the Christians, but the Jews too. And he's talking specifically about Jerusalem. Because in verse 20 he said, when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Now we brought out several times in Sunday school when Jesus they came out of the temple and they said, Lord, look at all these beautiful buildings. And they were. They were beautiful buildings. Nothing like it anywhere. And Jesus told them, said, there won't be one stone left on top of another one here. He was telling them what was actually going to happen. And it happened in 70 AD when Jerusalem was compassed with armies. There was an uprising, and the Romans came in and they left. They'd had enough of these Jews causing them trouble, and they left. And Jesus told them, when you see this, get out of town. Go. And God scattered them all over the world. And that was the last dispersion, what the way people describe they stayed dispersed until Israel became a nation again in our time frame. It began in the early 1900s, but they declared themselves a nation in 1948. And let's keep reading, because Jesus tells us when it would be, for the time frame. Verse 24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and led away captive into all nations. That happened in the first century. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Jerusalem trodden down of the Gentiles. Who's in control of Jerusalem now? Israel. So we can see we're pretty close to the end of time. Because Jesus said, until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. The time of the Gentiles is when the Jewish nation wouldn't believe in Jesus as a nation, as a whole. They're set aside, and God comes after the Gentiles, us. It's our time of grace for 2,000 years. And the time of the Gentiles has to be almost fulfilled because the Jews are in control of Jerusalem. Now, you can take that two different ways. Because that city is also split up into three parts. There's a Jewish, there's a Christian, and there's the Muslim. What's still sitting where the old temple was? Muslim mosque. Golden Dome is still sitting there. They don't have control of that man. They got control all the way around. But the Gentiles are not in control of it. So you could look at it, we're right in the middle. We're teetering. And with all this business going on over there now, that thing could fall at any time.
Yep.
And I'm not saying people blow it up. God can cause earthquakes. I don't know how he's going to do it, We're not supposed to try to figure that out, I don't think. We'll know it when it happens. You can't, it's very hard to see prophecy if you're living right in the middle of it. The people in that day didn't know Jesus. They were standing there looking at him. Scripture that had been telling them he's coming for thousands of years. And here he was, and they didn't recognize him. Things could be happening right in front of our face. Today, here, I'm talking about us.
Yes, sir.
And we not recognize it. Okay? I'm just saying. How many times has Brother Don stood up here and preached to us the Word of God, and we sitting out there about half asleep?
Sure.
No, pay no attention.
Okay.
Huh? I'm guilty. Are y'all?
I'm guilty.
Well, sure we are.
Yes, sir, Lord.
Right here, right now, the Spirit of God moving, and we don't recognize it. In songs we sing, in anything we do, and we're not recognized. I mean, we're human. We're human beings. Something could happen to us and we look back on it. Well, I know why that happened now. You can look back on it and you can see God's hand in it. You can see his fingerprints all over it. But when you live in it, right at the moment, it's hard to see. Jesus was telling them here, he'd already told them that all those buildings were going to be torn down. Now, we know, I I didn't go back and try to figure this out, but John, the Apostle John, was alive
Mm-hmm.
when this happened. He was around 100 years old when he died. So he was probably still alive when this happened, when the temple was torn down. And Jerusalem was trodden down to the Gentiles. They brought oxen in there and plowed it up. And Jesus said it would be that way until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And we can look at all the signs that Jesus gives us and tell us we're right here at. And there's been prophets and preachers and teachers for the last 100 years, I know, because you can go back and find their sermons that's been telling us the same thing.
Yeah.
We've heard it over and over and over, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. We're hearing it here. God's giving it to me. He's giving it to Brother Don. Just about everybody comes through here says the same thing. We're here. We're almost there. And Jesus, in verse 25, he said in there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations. Well, Jesus is telling us, you know, I went through all that last week, and I thought when I got out here, you know, they don't nobody care about all that. I mean, who cares about the blood moon and eclipse and all that stuff? It's kind of interesting, but, you know, so what? Well, it may just be, it may just be me. You know, sometimes you don't feel like you've done a good job.
You do it.
Put anybody else. But Jesus said, there shall be signs. And what did God, on the fourth day, created the sun, the moon, and the stars for signs, seasons, months, and days. For signs. To give us a sign. What did he tell Abraham? Look up there at the stars. I went outside the other night, or I come home, and it was clear. And I look up, and there's the moon. You know, just perfect. You can see it, you look around, all the stars twinkling around. And I thought, well, we okay tonight. God's billboard still lives up. I think I seen it when I come back. Well, the sign still lit up. Jesus said before that God's wrath, the sun's going to be dim. He's going to turn it down. The moon's going to lose its light. Stars are going to fall from heaven. It's going to get dark. It got dark on the day he was crucified. Admit that. God just took the dimmer switch and dialed it back. So, if you want a sign, go out there tonight, look up, stars still twinkling, God's sun's still good. Good for another night. And upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. That was back there in their day, and that's in our day. Is there perplexity of nations? Sure it is. I mean, it's getting pretty wild out there. Men's heart are the sea and the waves roaring, hurricanes, typhoons, and now we've got these earthquakes underwater that bring tsunamis, just wipe out whatever's on the coast. The oceans, there's another sign. Jesus told us about all that. Men's hearts failing and for fear. What does stress do to people?
Yeah, it makes you sick. Yeah. It will kill too.
That's right, it's big. Jesus is telling them all that 2,000 years ago, what's going to happen. Millionaires jumping out of windows because they lose some money. Or didn't make enough. Insurance companies getting bailed out by the government because they only made $2 billion this quarter. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Where'd you dead? Because it didn't make enough money.
They'll never have enough money.
Men's hearts failing for fear. Fear of what? Just fear. Fear of killing. Scared to death. That's something we all say. And for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Now that sounds like it's getting pretty serious, that the powers of heaven are shaken. I read something a while ago, you know, we talked about this before, but the Methodists would get together and they voted, and they outvoted the gay priest by about 60 votes, and I said, well, if they didn't outvote them up more than that, they done it for them. Well, they are, they split in the Methodists. They split. It's in the Southern Baptist. It's in all the mainline denominations. And people will have to make a choice. You know, we're going to believe what Jesus said or what the politicians are telling. Well, I advise us to follow Jesus. Do what he said. Because it's the way he said it. It's not any other way. You got something over?
When you're talking about fear, you know, I believe it's good to fear in a way, you know. I mean, there's a certain type of fear that we need to have, you know. It's not to say we're scared to death or this, that, but I believe there's a certain type of fear that we need to have in us, you know, that will keep us from doing certain things, you know.
I like to think about it, you know, we're supposed to fear God, but that's,
That's right. I mean, it's not,
even in Revelation, he said, that's one that won't be in heaven, fearful. Well, it's more of a respect,
that's right. That's what it is.
respectful fear of like, you know, if I do that, Daddy's gonna whoop my back. I'm gonna get lashed if I do that.
That's right.
Well, that's respect. You know, it's better if a grown up, if they threaten a child, to follow through them. I mean, if you go tell them you're gonna whip them for doing something, if they do it, well, you ain't gotta beat them half to death. Just give them a spanking, you know. You know what Mama whipped me with? A fly swatter. And I was hollering and kicking and screaming.
One of them wire meats, that's all they had, but.
Well, she was just whop, 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 whop. It made more noise than it did hurt. It hurt my feelings. But now, Mama could have really laid it on. But I didn't want to do that no more. And I know there are parents that abuse that. There are parents, you know, you can go overboard on anything. But it's okay to discipline your children. I saw this thing on Facebook, and it said, is it okay for them to give us permission to whip our kids? Something like that. I said, well, I didn't know I didn't have permission. I mean, I thought I could whip your kids if they need it. You know, I know you ain't supposed to, but good and neat. If it gets to where the government's telling you whether you can discipline your children or not, that's something you don't know. Because they want to take responsibility for all of that? No. I done got way off some. Then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud and with power and great glory. We're seeing all these things happen now. All these things that Jesus said would happen, we're seeing them happen now. And he's saying, when you see these things, and when you see these things, verse 28, begin to come to pass, we're seeing them come to pass. Then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Where are we? We're at the end. We are. And all this stuff we've been talking about, let me just go on a little further. And then he spake to them a parable, behold a fig tree. Well, that's Israel. We've said that over and over. And olive trees, when they now shoot forth, you see and know your own selves that summer is nigh at hand. So likewise you, when you see these things come to pass, know that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. This generation, we could be that generation. The generation that sees Jesus come back, more than likely, is living on the earth right now. I'm not saying I'll see it or you'll see it, but there's a specific time. Remember, Jesus died on the cross at the very hour, on the very day, on the very year that the Bible said. Well, he was born the day the Bible said, in the place where it said. And all the things that's happened since then is also in prophecy if we find it. It's all been written down before time. Now last week I went through several things about the blood moon because Jesus said there'll be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. Well, in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, the sun's going to do something. The moon's going to do something. We're going to be able to see it. There's signs in the stars if we can read them. I don't know that I haven't seen anybody that can. I heard them write about it. The devil just about took that away from the church. But if we knew how to read them, the signs are there. But we can see the moon when it turns red, and we can see the sun when it eclipses. And for it to happen 4 times, and the sun eclipsing in that possession, something that don't happen there. And last week we went over a few things, just let's see. Right after Israel became a nation in 1949 and 1950, there were 4 blood moons. The first one on Passover, the next one on Tabernacles, the next one on Passover, the next one on Tabernacle, on those feast days. And the sun eclipsed 12 days before Tabernacle the last time. And each one of these, it was just like that. It happened on that day. Now, that don't just happen out of the blood. When Israel becomes a nation and hadn't been a nation for 2,000 years. Now, a good friend of mine gave me a book the other day, and it's kind of slow getting started. I thought, I don't know about this, but the more I read till my eyes about crossed. And I'd have to put it down, and I'd read some more. And it got to talking about some of these. And it didn't just happen with the blood moons, and it didn't just happen on the feast days. It also happened on Jubilee years. Every 50th year is a Jubilee. It happened on Jubilee. And in the Jewish synagogues, they have scriptures out of the Old Covenant that they're designated to read that goes back hundreds of years. They got it all mapped out, which scriptures to read on which day. And on the days that all this happened, they were reading the prophecies that was going to happen that day in their church. It's just boom, 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 boom. And they didn't realize it at the time. They were living it. They didn't see what was happening. But you can look back at it now, and God's fingerprints is all over. Well, this just didn't happen out of blue. And it's not just that. I just picked out a little bit to go over, because Jesus talking about the fig tree sprouting leaves. He said there'd be signs in the moon and sun. And now we see it's the Jubilee years. In 1948, President Truman recognized Israel as a nation. Now that's what, we've all heard that, and that's what happened. But President Truman had been president just a few months. Franklin Roosevelt died in office. Truman took over. Germany surrendered. He dropped a bomb on Japan, President Truman. He saw the end of the wars. Roosevelt had lived all the way through all of them in the Great Depression and died. Didn't see the end of it. Truman was president just a few months. He was 60 years old. Franklin Roosevelt, they said, if he would have stayed president, he was against the state of Israel becoming a state. And the State Department was against it. When Harry Truman got in there, he was for it. And he was for it because before he became president, he was a Bible student. He had read the Old Testament through and through several times. And he believed in Israel becoming a state. He went against his own State Department. Have you ever heard of a president that would bow up to anybody? I think so. Well, Harry Truman must have been, before my time. But he bowed up. And he was the main reason. The other countries wasn't going to do it if the United States didn't help them. And Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion declared Israel a state. Now, I'm skipping over a whole lot of stuff here. Skipping over a lot. Declared Israel a state, and 13 minutes later, President Truman recognized the state of Israel. That happened in the year of Jubilee of that year. And I believe that was Hanukkah. And David Ben-Gurion was a general that came in and helped take the nation of Israel. And what's so odd about that is 2,000 years before, when Israel lost their nation, they had a general that was over their army 2,000 years ago. And his name was David Ben-Gurion. And now, 2,000 years later, a man with the same name leads Israel's armies to take back that country. And you can look back at, There's a lot more to it than that. I just wrote down a few things.
There are no coincidences.
No, well, it can't be just, you know, it can't. Because it was all written down ahead of time. It's all written down just exactly how it was gonna happen, and it happened. President Truman had been in office less than a year. He was 60 years old when he commanded the strongest nation on the face of the earth. And he made a declaration that Israel would be a nation. That had happened before. When Cyrus defeated the Babylonians, defeated Nebuchadnezzar, and in his first year, he gave the order for the Jews to go back home and rebuild the temple. And Isaiah named him in his book before he was ever born. He was 60 years old when he took office. And he did all that in his first year. And there was a Jewish rabbi. I've read so much stuff, I hope I'm getting it all straight. There was a Jewish rabbi that came to America after Truman did all that, and he went to President Truman and he told him about Cyrus. And he told him about the prophecies that Truman fulfilled on the day that the Bible says they were going to be fulfilled, and said Harry Truman sat there with a tear rolling down his face. There was also, if you want to call him a prophet, now this is going to sound kind of wild, but back in the late 1800s, Mark Twain took a trip to Israel. And he went through Israel and he said it's the most desolate, dry, good for nothing land that I've ever seen in my life. And I'm paraphrasing. But if you go to the Old Testament, he quoted it, and Mark Twain wasn't quoting the Bible, he was just writing a book. He wrote a book about it. And quoted it word for word what the Old Testament said. And he said, one day there'll be flowers growing here. Harry Truman had a plaque, had a little deal hanging on the wall in his office. I wish I'd have written it down. You know how Mark Twain came up with all these sayings, country-fied sayings? He said, when a man does righteous, it'll make some people mad, but the rest of them will stand in wonder. And Harry Truman said that quote right there is one of the reasons that I signed. He said it was the right thing. Mark Twain. Wouldn't think of him as being a prophet, you know, old Huck Finn, but he wrote another book too about Israel. And the President of the United States, when Israel became a nation, read Mark Twain, God speaking through Mark Twain, and Harry Truman, and Cyrus thousands of years ago. He wasn't a Hebrew. He didn't worship God, but he knew God told him to let those Jews go back home and rebuild that temple, and he did. And who's to say? You want to bring that up today? That God can't use a president today? And I'm not a politician. I don't give two hoots who you vote for. Okay? I'm not voting nobody. But God can use who he wants to get done what he wants done on the day that it's supposed to happen. Because he does it over and over 19 years after Israel became a state, they still didn't have Jerusalem. Remember, Jesus was talking about Jerusalem. Well, in Jesus' day, they'd already lost the state. But they were still letting them control Jerusalem. It was after they lost their state that they lost Jerusalem. Well, God comes along when he makes Israel a state again. They don't have Jerusalem. You see what I'm saying? When they lost it, they lost the state first, the nation of Israel. And then they lost the city. 70 AD, when they came in, armies came around it, Jesus told them what he wanted. Okay, when Israel became a state again in 1948, 19 years later in 67, they took back Jerusalem in a war where their state was surrounded by armies. Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Mediterranean Sea over here. They surrounded. And they met with the generals and the prime minister, and they said, well, if we don't want to wait on them to attack, let's hit them first. And their Air Force took off and destroyed those other three countries' Air Forces before they get off the ground. Wiped them out. On the day. On the day it was supposed to happen. According to the scripture, they were reading in the synagogue about God ordering the birds flying over Jerusalem. It's just, you see God's fingerprint in all of it. Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, who declared Israel a state. President Truman comes along, he's in on that, making Israel a state. Then 19 years later, Jerusalem's taken back. And when they took Jerusalem, there was a chaplain of the Israeli army, last name Golan. He was the chaplain. He was the rabbi of the army. And he had an assistant that he sent to get the rabbi. Now his assistant's father-in-law was a rabbi. And his name was Hakoi. And that means his father-in-law was a descendant of Aaron. Well, when the driver went to get his father-in-law had a friend that he wanted him to come to. He was also a rabbi. He was a descendant of Aaron. And they come into the city of Jerusalem to the wall, and that guy stands there and prays for 2 or 3 hours. And he's repeating all his Old Testament scriptures. And he's prophesying. And they're singing a new song. A lady had written a new song just a month before, Jerusalem of God. It was a lamentation about not having their city. But now they were singing the song, and the scripture they read in the synagogues that day is, I will turn your mourning into joy. Have you ever had God turn your mourning, lamentation into joy? It's resurrection. It's new life. It's a jubilee year. When everything is returned to its rightful owner. And these 2 priests and their driver was also the descendant of Abraham. Abraham's descendants, the rightful priests, to minister in the temple, were there praying before the wall. All it was labeled. And that's the wall around the temple. That's not the temple. And now, and we talked about, a little bit about blood moons happening in 2014 and 15. This was right before we elected a new president. Now, every president going back to Ronald Reagan promised when they were running, they were going to make Jerusalem the capital. We would recognize it as the capital of Israel. None of them did. They all promised it, none of them did. Until President Trump got in. 70 years to the day, on the day that Israel was declared a nation, 70 years to the day, we recognize Jerusalem as the capital. In 2014 and 15, on those feast days, it's when the blood moons came out, and they said something's fixing to happen. Something godly is fixing to happen. I don't know what all else is fixing to happen, but after 70 years from the time Jesus was born, Jerusalem was taken back, left, the temple left. Now, in the last days, 70 years after Israel becomes a state, Jerusalem's taken back. And we recognize the greatest country on the face of the earth by far. Just like in Cyrus's day. Now, I don't know if you got anything out of this or not, but this is all fascinating to me, because there ain't nobody else but God can come up and plan and then make it happen. That's all we got.
That's good.